Yesterday, we celebrated Tu B'Shvat, the Jewish holiday of the trees. And every year on Tu B'Shvat, I think of a poem that my Uncle Ronnie wrote, and I'd like to share it with all of you now. God talks to me when I'm walking through the woods, enjoying the wonders of nature. God talks to me when I hear the rushing waters of a river, and the sound of the trees blowing and rustling in the wind. God talks to me through the singing and the chirping of birds and insects. God talks to me when I see a deer cross the trail, stop and gaze at me as if she is saying hello. God talks to me when I am with my family, surrounded by the most perfect love. God talks to me through the most rewarding feelings I get when helping another person any way I can. God talks to me when I gather with my friends and share wonderful times together. Thank you for the ability and the opportunity to experience life to its fullest, and please keep on talking. Many of us can relate to my Uncle Ronnie. We have seen God in the rustling of the leaves in the wind, in the faces of family and friend gathered around our Shabbat table, in acts of love and justice that we give to the world. This week in our parashah in Yitro, we read the revelation at Sinai, when God spoke to each and every Israelite who was gathered at the foot of the mountain. God appears to the Israelites as fire and as smoke, and the whole mountain was trembling. And then in this Torah portion, God gives the Israelites the 10 Commandments. Though the Israelites, our ancestors, had the same shared communal experience, according to a midrash in the Pesikta de Rav Kahana, say that 5 times fast, according to this midrash, every Israelite saw God differently, according to their own ability to understand, to their own personality, and their own life experience up to that point. Some of you may be like my Uncle Ronnie, but others of you may see God only here in the synagogue, or in the hospital, or maybe in the embrace of a new baby, or maybe even not at all. But as I spoke about in my sermon 2 Shabbatot ago, it's hard for me not to see God in the photos and in the videos of the Israeli hostages reuniting with their families. Tear-filled pictures of strength, of the enduring power of love and hope. A family and friends separated by 470 plus days of torture, of waiting, of wondering, finally culminating in one embrace, in one smile, in the knowledge that millions of prayers from around the world have finally been answered. And yet, in the images of last week's release, of Or Levi, of Eli Sharabi, and of Ohad Ben Ami, whose emaciated bodies recall a time in Jewish history, the Shoah, the Holocaust, in which theologian Melissa Raphael claims that acts of sheer evil banished God. She says the evil banished God from the concentration camps. And last week, or in the past few days, upon their return, the 3 hostages shared with this woman, Idit Ohel, the mother of hostage Alon Ohel, that her son was alive but was injured, and he has been kept in chains, in a cage, in a tunnel in Gaza, all these days and weeks. And hearing his mother's interview this week, her pleas for her son's immediate release, I pictured him alone, truly, his name is alone, but also alone, truly in the depths of hell. And as I read this week about the revelation at Sinai in our Torah portion, which our tradition teaches was not only revealed to those standing at Sinai that day, but is revealed to each and every Jew who has ever or will ever live, I asked myself, how does Alon Ohel, how do any of the hostages in Gaza, how do they see, how do they hear, how do they experience God? like Auschwitz, is the evil done by their captors? Does it banish God from their surroundings? But then I heard this week, just a few days ago, the story of Orly Gilboa, the mother of hostage Daniela Gilboa, who was released 3 weeks ago. And a couple times throughout the war, this mother, Orly, attended a challah baking group in Jerusalem, which met in support of the hostages. And as they were baking the challah, the organizer asked Orly, who has this beautiful voice, you can see a recording online, she asked Orly to sing a song of a way of giving her strength, and said that Daniela's neshama, that her soul, would hear this song all the way in Gaza. And both times she visited this challah baking group, the song that came to her mind to sing was Keshahalev bocheh, when the heart cries. And the first line, it's a famous Israeli song, when the first line reads, when the heart cries, only God hears that. And then the song ends with the Shema. And Orly recounted in an interview she did this week, she said, I've been trying to recount to Daniela, my daughter, all the efforts for her release, both spiritual and physical. I told her about these 2 challah events in Jerusalem, and how both times I just involuntarily chose to sing Keshahalev bocheh to her. And then she recounts that Daniela went pale. She said, no, Ima, no, how could this be? And with tears in her eyes, Daniela explained, one day in captivity in Gaza, when everything just felt too much, and my friends and I were struggling, I sat them down, and I told them that it was time to use this gift of music as a healing tool. And with my voice as freed hostage Daniela, I chose to sing Keshahalev bocheh and Shema Yisrael once and then twice. Perhaps her soul really did hear her mom's song, and perhaps this was how she saw God in that dark place. Or perhaps it was in the faces of her friends, fellow young female soldiers, Agam Berger, Liri Albag, Karina Ariev, and Naama Levi, who counted each and every tiny little grain of rice that they were given so that they could share it equally, so they'd each have the best possible chance of surviving. Or perhaps hostage Amit Susana saw God in the face of 20-year-old Liri Albag, who risked torture or worse to convince their Hamas captors that Amit was not in the IDF and thereby saved her life. Perhaps Keith Siegel saw God in the face of 28-year-old hostage Emily Damari, who tried just a couple weeks ago to convince Hamas to release Keith in her place since he was sick and she thought that she could hold out longer. Melissa Raphael, that theologian I mentioned a couple minutes ago, she wrote a book called The Female Face of God in Auschwitz. And she contends that the evil of the Nazis banished God from that most hellish of all places. But she also argues that through acts of loving kindness, of chesed, from prisoner to prisoner, such as sharing with a fellow starving inmate half of one's tiny morsel of rotten bread, or wiping the filth from another woman's face so that they could see one another as human beings. She says that through relational acts like these, they were able to bring an exiled God back into the world. So my prayer this Shabbat is, of course, that in less than 12 hours, Sagi Dekalchen, Sasha Trufanov, and E.R. Horn will come home. But also, that one day, very soon, each and every one of the hostages will be home, will be safe, and like my Uncle Ronnie and like each of us, that they will see God in the swaying of the trees, in the rushing of the rivers, and in the faces of the people that they love. Ken Yiratzon, may it be God's will.